consumer and producer surplus is another area that you should study before you look at market structure, because it can really identify and show very visually why some market structures are not very efficient, and it can show the loss in allocative efficiency as well. So here is the specification objective. So consumer surplus is the additional amount that consumers would be willing to pay over the equilibrium price that is actually paid by consumers. And I'll show you that in a diagram in a second. But producer surplus is the amount below the equilibrium price that producers are willing to accept. So if we look at this on a diagram and we have our equilibrium and this is the actual price that's charged, there will be some consumers that have got the price for the product for a price that's a lot below what they would have been willing to pay for it, and that is the concept of consumer surplus. But the dark grey shaded triangle is the amount that consumers, if you counted up all the consumers that have gained this product and counted up all of the amounts that they would have been willing to pay above that price, it would add up to what that area, that triangle represents, which would be a monetary value, because we've got kind of price here times this quantity. And here, very similar concept, these producers here would have been willing to accept much below this price. So this triangle here represents the monetary value of what they would have been willing to accept below that price. So all very interesting, but not very useful at the moment until we think back to now. I'm just going to explain it using the model that you'd have learned in year 1 or AS for monopolies, because it would get very complicated if I put all the lines on. But we will have a look at monopoly models where you've got kind of average cost and marginal cost on there as well as marginal revenue. But the one that you'd have learned at AS is just that the monopoly restricts supply. So they set a limit on supply, and it's to the left of the equilibrium that the competitive market would have set. So this is my equilibrium that's been set by the monopolist who is aiming to maximize profits. And what happens is it cuts away that little triangle there. Okay, and this triangle is made up of the lost consumer surplus and lost producer surplus in the market, and we can call that a deadweight loss. And this is a loss of allocative efficiency that occurs because you're losing this consumer surplus and this producer surplus, because if the market were competitive, these consumers in this top box here, this top triangle, could have consumed the product because the price would have been a bit lower. And also there's a loss of welfare in terms of there are producers that haven't been able to sell to this market, presumably because they can't enter the market because of the high barriers to entry. So that's the deadweight loss, and this will happen wherever there's anything that restricts supply. So monopolies, we've just looked at that example, but an indirect tax will actually create a deadweight loss. Now, usually we apply indirect taxes to things that have negative externalities, so external costs on third parties, and things that are demerit goods. So actually, you might find that it outweighs the kind of the negative external cost on the environment. So you've got to be careful if you're writing an essay on that and you talk about an indirect tax causing a deadweight loss, because actually it might get you closer to where marginal social benefits equal marginal social costs. But it depends upon what you're putting an indirect tax on. So a minimum price or price floor will also restrict supply, regulation as well. So there are many things that can actually cause a loss of consumer and producer surplus, but it's important that you can define those concepts and that you can point them out on a diagram. So the consumer surplus is just the amount above the price, the triangle above the equilibrium price, and the producer surplus is the one below.